So if 70 million Americans between 18 and 35 years old were to march upon Washington, I think it would be a major wake-up for a government that's been very complacent in dealing with what its citizens really need, i.e. education, health, a sense of future, a sense of optimism. It's so much living by the day to day, and there's actually a class of politics which is causing, I guess, the clash of generations. So yes, I think that's enough to trigger a clash of generations, which I think is already in place and just showing itself in different ways.
I think that the whole idea of generations being somehow connected just simply because of age is slightly outdated. I think that there's socioeconomic, cultural factors that make it very hard to compare a 60-year-old Swiss person with a 60-year-old man from South Sudan. Similarly, a 20-year-old Greek youth may or may not have a lot in common with a 20-year-old person from South Asia. So I think that there are things that are on a local perspective that we should certainly take into account when we're thinking about how to overcome challenges. Understanding where someone's coming from is the most important part about understanding how you can work together. Thank you.
I think clash of generations, I do agree, is not just a local, but it is also a wider issue, but it starts locally. It starts in the small nucleus, like a family, etc., but it also then entails much more in a country, also in the world, and I think we need to work on it from the two sides. So we need to start in the smaller, also on the country base, but also start to integrate it into more international movements. Could be free movements of people, it could be healthcare, it could be many other things. And I think we need to make sure that we don't get a silo mentality across the various generations, that we actually build a horizontal line.
I agree with what Peter has said. And I think the most important thing, though, is fostering permission and fostering confidence in young people so that they can actually deal with the processes, they can have confidence in voicing their opinion, and they cannot be overwhelmed by the process. I think we've got a lot of work to do around communication and bringing things down to a level that has general comprehension and understanding, and so that change can happen from both sides. Thank you.
Fostering confidence is certainly crucial in overcoming the current crisis. Especially with regard to youth unemployment. However, we shouldn't focus exclusively on what the current leaders can do, but we should also consider how the youth can be empowered and how the youth should participate. I think that young people have duties too, notably political participation. So there's a lot of work there as well.
I also think that young people may see an impediment to change, that they're not necessarily familiar with the ways of the past, but it's actually their greatest asset. So the fact that they see things in a different way and aren't perhaps familiar with how things have been done in the past is actually their greatest skill set.
I think the question if there is a clash between generations is wrong. So it's not the question if we have a clash or not. The real question is why we need a clash of generation. So I want that young people are standing up against the set positions and that they are trying to improve the world how it is.
And personally, I would rephrase the question and say that it's not about a clash, but more like a discussion, implying that older people and younger people are talking to each other and blaming the other for common problems. And the issue for me is that the way the older generation is trying to solve problems are not making sense anymore for the young ones. So the issue is more about finding new means of communication and new means of finding consensus between young and old, poor and rich in different parts of the world, to make sure the collective decisions that are to be taken now and for the future are made with consensus and are sustainable in this regard.
I completely agree with the fact that clash of generation is really symptomatic of clash of ideas about the old world and ideas from the new world. The new world is largely being driven by youth and their aspirations. Unfortunately, those aspirations aren't finding enough ground to take root, and this is what is leading to potential clashes. And I also believe in the fact that ultimately both the generations have to engage constructively and come up with solutions of those hard-pressing issues that the world faces, be it be it unemployment, be it poverty, be it be it the problem of nuclear terrorism and nuclear proliferation, and even climate change. The right now the need of the hour is to ensure that there's a dialogue between the leadership from the older generation and these new entrepreneurs, these new ideators, social startup guys, students, academia, to come up with a comprehensive package of solutions to address these issues in a time-bound and an actionable manner.
I think, like the last speaker, there's definitely a clash of generations at work. And as somebody who kind of has a foot in both of these generations, who has been in the business world for 25 years, I feel both a sense of responsibility as well as a sense of mission to try to address some of these. But my message to the younger generation would be: don't let the kind of barriers that you see keep you from being able to act. It's easier than ever to start a company. It's easier than ever to develop a technology and take it not only out of R&D but into the product cycle and out to the world. It's easier than ever to have a voice in government. In fact, not having a legacy, not having a history is a tremendous asset when it comes time to engaging with the public and trying to affect public policy. And so many of the governments out there are actually hungry now in a way that is unusual for not only the voice of youth, but for bringing technologists and bringing a youthful perspective into government projects. And if you can't find that at your government, look forward and elsewhere. So I think, like the last speaker, I do think dialogue is important, and I think finding places that mix kind of the younger generation with the old around common challenges and such is important. But don't wait for the older generation. Go out and execute, go out and build, go out and disrupt, and I think we're going to end up at a better place because of it.
Definitely there's a clash of generations which we see in our nation, and that begins at the family level itself, when children are now choosing what marriages to go to, what careers to go to as per their wishes. And this goes up right to the top, including the political leadership. And we are seeing in India where age-old concepts of, whatever worked yesterday will not work today is something which is coming up. The younger generation is challenging corruption, it's challenging for the lackluster policy making, it's looking for good businesses, good jobs, and that's the clash of generations which we are facing. And one thing good is that the younger generation is winning.
I want to talk about the clash of generations. Now it's under heated discussion in China because the older people just don't want to retire and the younger people just want the older people to step out of place and get the younger people's jobs. But I think I want to quote what Brian just said, the youth just step out and disrupt and do something like an enterprise to have your own entrepreneurship. But I still think that the older people needs some intergenerational contract setting with the younger generation, because without the older people's investment, even if you have some entrepreneurship, you would do nothing with your brilliant ideas. So let's do something and change the world. Thank you.
To respond to those ideas, I think that's a really interesting perspective from both China and India on the clash of the generations, both from a perspective of clashing ideologies and cultural values, as well as the clash in terms of the employment market. I'd just like to suggest maybe that it's not necessarily such a stark clash, that there's some room for collaboration and mutual learning, that with cultural values, as we can see, that attitudes can change when confronted with new ideas, and you can teach old dogs new tricks in some ways, that older generations have been willing to change values on things like gay rights, as we've seen in many parts of the world, and that older people can play an important role in mentoring for the younger generation through, whether it's be as venture capitalists and startups, that there are ways of sharing the skill sets that they have across the generations and making the pie larger for everyone.
I think that the clash of generations is an issue which we should try to discuss and bring about in solutions with very tense discussions. The issue is intensifying, but I personally believe that solution cannot be in waiting to clash together, but in tackling all the current issues on the desk, and there are many, together, older and younger generation. So engage in this and let's go forward together.
I definitely believe there is a clash of generations, as there was always a clash of generations before. But this one is particularly intensified by the internet, where the new generation was brought up with totally new communication tools that the old generation just is not used to. And this changed the way people communicate, the people behave, the people learn. And this makes it much, much difficult to find a common ground and come to the same table and discuss things with the same language. And this, I think, creates a lot of friction that makes the clash of the generation much more visible at this time than it was in the past.
I think the internet has definitely affected the clash of generations, but I think it's moreover the whole kind of global change. The youth of today, they can travel all over the world, and they get ideas from different places, they see different cultures in a way that perhaps before in a more closest societies you only saw on TV or read from the news, but we can experience this. And I think this really contributes and makes the clash of generations more acute today than it was ever before.
Yes, today it has become a lot easier to learn about different countries, because we have an internet. But there is no substitute to coming in real sight, coming to a place like this and interact and hear real voice of different problems in different countries. So I fully agree that internet is making it easier for us to understand, and sometimes it makes more accumulated knowledge of difference between generations. Therefore, the clash of generations could be severer with sharing of information in the internet. But once you come to a place like this, we have sort of a different impression. We know that different generations are caring about different generations, so it is absolutely important to come to a real site, not only the virtual site.
I believe there is no substitute for actually coming and meeting real people and visiting sites. However, internet made it really easy. I mean, not everyone has the opportunity to travel around and to meet different people. Internet made the information about different countries accessible for a lot of people, regardless of their socioeconomic background. Before the internet, I believe the ability to connect and to learn about different people and different cultures were limited to the people who are well off and have the economic means. Now the information accessibility, making the information accessible to a lot of people is actually a power, and I think this can promote understanding, but it can also widen the gap between people because of misconceptions. You never truly understand something or someone by just reading about them, and so it's important to understand the limitation of the information that we are getting from the internet. We're getting a lot of information, but it's not necessarily sufficient to build real view and to get rid of the prejudice and the stereotypes that we have about each other.
Gathering information is a very important thing in our world. We have several possibilities. We can meet each other and talk to each other. That is one part. And the other part is, as we just heard, gathering in the internet, so that we can find informations in the internet. But we have to know one thing, the internet is full of information and different kind of information. We have then to weigh whether it's right what we read, or we have to criticize it. So we really have to go into the information, we have to deepen the information before we believe the internet. By sitting together, we can discuss the problem, we can find ways, we can analyze what the other people say. And therefore, a day as today, the symposium, the St. Gallen Symposium, is a very good opportunity to exchange information and to discuss information, and that is not possible with the internet.